Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock. And again, always smiling. I'm so happy to be here with Boo Trundle, and she is writer, artist, and performer. And we're here to talk about her novel, The Daughtership, but so much more. So welcome, Boo.
Thanks for having me. I'm really happy to be here.
Oh, I told you I'm excited to talk to you and learn about your journey. And really, I guess let's start with the inspiration for this book and how it came into being.
It is called The Daughtership, and it's a novel. And I've always been a fiction writer, but it definitely has autobiographical basics. You know, the basics are autobiographical. There are a lot of things in the novel that are true to my actual life. I just am a fiction reader and have never been much of a memoir reader. I've always read fiction. I've always really respected fiction. And so even though I really needed to tell my own story and make sense of it through writing, it's always been fictionalized. So it's really a story of healing, and it's very much my story of healing, but it's a novel. It's
Yeah.
also made up. So you gotta sort that out yourself, but it's true and it's not true. And that's kind of the theme of the novel, like really what is true.
Oh
It's
my
true to
gosh,
me. It may not be true to you. And there's emotional truth and then there's the limitations of memory. So by writing a novel, I didn't have to worry about any of that.
I love it, and I totally understand because I told you I'm writing my memoir, but I also promised my dad on his deathbed that I would write his story. And as I started writing it, I said, I need to make this fiction because I need to fill in the blanks. And so it's so much of what I know from his truth. But there are parts where I'm just filling in the blank and I'm just finding the flow so much easier than doubting myself, like, oh, is this accurate? But to still be able to put those truths out there. I mean, what a beautiful way to share your story. But yeah, fill in those blanks. Yeah, wonderful. Um, Gosh, I was going to ask,
Fill in
oh,
the blanks, fill in the blanks, also make things up. I think that's really important. I had this therapist when I was in my early 20s, and I was really struggling with things from my childhood, abuse basically, that I couldn't really remember clearly, but it was definitely affecting me. And I was really hung up on, did it happen or not? Like what actually happened? And she really liberated me by saying, doesn't really matter if it happened, just treat it as if it did, and you can heal from it. And it'll be healing either way. You don't have to really get hung up on what you're healing from. Just go ahead and do the things that will be healing. And that really liberated me. And it's liberated me in general. Like I do a lot of things, like healing work or journaling, or I'm in 12-step programs, so I do step work. I don't get too hung up on how much is true or not true, or whether it really happened, did it really happen that way? Because it's for my healing. So it's I'm not showing it to anyone else. And I'm not asking anyone else to validate it, or I'm not in court. I'm not like going up in front of a judge. I don't actually have to prove anything that's true. If it feels true, or if I think it might be true, or if I imagine it might be true, I can heal from it. Whether or not it is or not is, like I said, I'm not asking anyone to confirm or deny it. It's for me.
yes, yes. I tell you, part of my healing journey when I was in EMDR and going back to we kept revisiting old traumas, particularly during my very rough childhood. Um, and it was even suggested to me that I changed the scenario. I changed the memory, and so instead of being one of my experiences was a bank robbery in which I was trapped in a corner with a gun with this perpetrator, and so I shifted it to where I was able to escape that situation instead of being trapped in it, because feeling trapped was a big part of what I was going through with my panic attacks. So I love that idea. Yeah, of just I love that you said I'm not in a court of law. Like it's just me doing my healing work because it is an
Exactly.
individual
And I'm
journey.
not trying to convict anyone either. And I'm not trying to, like I have siblings that have different memories. I'm not trying to prove anything to them. I'm not making them go over it. It's just for me. And I
Yeah.
also really like what you said about the rewrite, changing the narrative, because that I got introduced to that in a workshop, sort of like a what is it called? Like a reenactment workshop where like somebody plays your mother, someone plays your father, and you recreate the situation. And it was exactly that idea that you would go back and rewrite something. So yeah, so I was in a workshop and we were learning, people were acting out, and so and so's your father's. You know what that's called? What is that called again? I can't remember. It's kind of like role play, but I think there's a
Uh,
therapeutic name for it.
and I can't think of the name either. Yeah.
Well, the idea was to completely rewrite the story. So, and that actually is part of my novel, part of the end of the daughtership, not to be a spoiler, but at the end of the book, the character does go back and starts reframing and rewriting the actual events that happened in the beginning of the novel. So I actually use it as a fictional tool, which is a big part of the daughtership in general. Um, I call it spritlit. I've made up a genre for it, like spiritual literature, in the sense that I was using therapeutic techniques to grow and heal in the 8-year period that I was writing the novel. And some of those therapeutic techniques became fictional craft techniques that I used to tell the story. So it's kind of functioning on more than one level. It's a novel, but it's also a healing chronicle. And hopefully, I call it a process novel. Hopefully, that the process of reading the novel, the person who's reading it experiences the same kind of healing process, some version of it, not exactly, but that's my goal for it. And I would like to make it a genre. It's kind of like it's a spiritual novel. I want it to be sort of alchemical when you read it, that you have a healing experience while
Yeah.
you're being entertained.
Right, right. Well, and I think I read somewhere in something, maybe on your website, that um, there's a parts work component to it, or IFS.
That was one of the other therapeutic techniques I was using. Uh, I did try EMDR, but that didn't work for me. Maybe I'll try it again sometime. That kind of re-traumatized me. And maybe it was just the person I was working with. I did not like that. But IFS I did for about 5 or 6 years, and that is a huge part of the novel because there are 3 characters who are actually some of my inner parts that I discovered doing that work, and they became characters in the novel. Actually, 4 of them. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just really my creative journey and my healing journey are just completely parallel and always have been. And I just in the last 10 years just embraced it and decided, and I'm still doing it. I'm still doing it right now with my new novel. I'm trying to fold in what I'm experiencing, like the transformations that I'm going through into the novel. That really keeps me interested as an artist, because not in a narcissistic way, but I think that we're all here to heal. That's what we're doing here. And art is healing. But sometimes art, I think sometimes when people are writing books or when they're making art, they don't quite incorporate the alchemical tools they're using to heal at the same time. Really trying to like wrap them up together. I do think the daughtership succeeds at that. I do feel that way, but I wasn't doing it consciously. And now with my new book, I'm trying to do it consciously, which may be more challenging because I'm aware of what I'm doing. I think with the daughtership, it was almost an accident.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I so totally relate because I've been trying to integrate and weave in to my book everything that I've learned and all of this stuff. And you're right, when you're doing it consciously, that's when I'm like, I'm doubting myself and questioning, like, oh, is this working? Is this pushing? Is it right? And when it flows naturally, like you had in the daughtership, what a beautiful
Well, I think
tale.
part of the problem is, somebody when they were in a friend of mine interviewed me. We haven't published this interview yet, but she knows me pretty well, and she's in touch not only with what I've been going through on my personal journey, but she's in my writing group. So she's seen me over the years trying different techniques and different processes to write. And she asked me, how did you have the courage to go so crazy, to just be so wild in the structure of this book and to just write so loosely and so out of the norm? Because it's not a normal novel at all. It's a very strange reading experience. It works, I believe, but some of the like Amazon reviews were like, I didn't know what was happening. And so the book, I do think the book teaches you how to read it if you stick with it, but it is definitely unconventional. And she asked me, how did I have the courage to do that? And part of it is that I did trust what you're saying. Like what I'm hearing you say is that you're trying to weave. I saw you using your hand, like you're trying to weave in some of the things that are all the different things that are, I saw you weaving. And then I also imagined kind of a collage where you're just trying to paste things on top of each other that may not logically or rationally belong together. And if we're trying to write, in a sort of traditional mainstream way, everything has to be so orderly and outlined and beginning, middle, end, cause and effect. There's all these very rational organizational structures that we're accustomed to when we're writing or reading. I threw all that out the window and used a different kind of organization and just had faith that eventually it would all make sense. And it did. And I'm doing the same with my new novel. At the end, I believe it will all make sense. But there's moments when you just feel like you're upside down with no clothes on, like swinging in the wind, as a writer. And you just have to stick with it and suffer a bit. I mean, when you do, like writing, there's a fair amount of suffering in showing up to the page, especially when you're trying to write about your deepest, most innermost emotional experiences.
Oh, most assuredly. And I'm just smiling so big and clapping for you because I told you we just released a book, a collaborative book project a couple of weeks ago. And in my chapter, when I was getting feedback on it, I was doing the same thing. There was a lot of like flashbacks mid, because that's what was happening in my brain, living that moment as I was listening to my mom, gasping for air in the hospice bed as she was passing away. And I was being taken back in time to 1972 as a 6-year-old or whatever, I mean, so that's the way I was writing it because that's what was happening. And I know that as readers, that's what happens in people's brains, right? Like, it's not neat and orderly. It is chaotic at times, or what seems chaotic, right?
Definitely. And it is this, it's a dance between capturing consciousness and also representing it in a way that people can follow and organize their own reaction to it. And I've learned a lot about that. Like, for example, trauma. Like, I took a workshop about, when you're writing about tough things that have happened, it's important to not just jump right in and, be like, the car hit me and my brain exploded, like you can't just start right with the car hitting the body if that's the trauma. I'm just using that as an example of trauma, something generic, like a car crash. Like you need to ground the person, that it was a summer day and I was eating an ice cream cone in the car and the radio was on and I was listening to the top 40. You ground it in all of the actual sensual things that are happening. And then you can maybe get to the car crash. But there's lots of craft tricks to ground the reader so that you're just not assaulting them with these things that have happened. And that's just one example, so there's tricks in the craft, but then once you know the tricks, I think it's also important to be able to let them go and just go for it sometimes and just confuse the reader. And because that's, as you say, like consciousness and experience aren't always perfectly orderly.
Right. Yes. Well, especially when trauma's involved. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just the way it is.
Hmm.
Hence why EMDR can be so very difficult because we go back into those things that we were trying to push away anyway. Yeah. Well, making a little bit of a left turn. So when I was on your
Okay.
website, I loved your logo, which is the waves, and your L comes up as a periscope. And so I just think that's so cool, only because what you're writing about is this being under water, right? And this escape, this like trying to get to the surface of the truth. And
Right.
it's just so poetically beautiful to me. I don't know where it is, and I couldn't tell you really what I wrote about, but I wrote a poem years and years and years and years ago, and it was so much about like being under that surface, and it was talking about these horrible things, the sexual abuse and everything that had happened, and trying to see through the surface, trying to get to the surface. And so I just wanted to tell you that that's so resonated with me. Just your logo and the submarine and everything, it's just kind of caught me.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, the ship is a submarine. Just a submarine is just an underwater boat, basically. And it does, it is sort of the designing principle of the novel that, there's two threads going. There's the thread of Catherine, who is a middle-aged woman, and her life is failing her, and she's failing her life. She's sort of, to push the metaphor, she's sort of drowning in her own experience, even though there's nothing horrible about her life. She's just not. able to keep afloat and emotionally and psychically. She has two kids, they're teenagers, she's married, but everything is, she's just not going to make it, if she doesn't just face her deepest, hidden painful selves, these little parts we talked about. And those little parts are little inner children who were abandoned way back in when terrible things happened in her childhood. And they're living on this submarine, and the submarine is defunct. It's at the bottom of the ocean. It's actually a U-boat from the World War II. It's rusted. There's no air. It doesn't work. It's just completely not working. And they're trapped there, these three little girls. So two little girls and a little boy. And they're all parts of Catherine. And they're trapped there. And they're aware that they're going to die if they don't fix the submarine. And so the question, that's sort of the designing principle of the novel. The plot is, are they going to make it or not? And every time she turns to face them and acknowledges her truth, something good happens with the submarine, and it rises up in the water, or the engine starts working, or there's air all of a sudden, but then she'll go back in denial and it'll get stuck again, so it's this sort of back and forth between those two stories. And I think that there's two plot momentums. You do need a plot in a novel, no matter how wild or creative or healing or spiritual it is. People need to want to turn the page, or they're not going to read it. So the two plot momentums, one comes from, is Catherine going to survive and stay married and take care of her kids and live in her life, or is she going to kill herself or just blow her life up? And the other thread is, are these little inner parts ever going to be acknowledged, and will this submarine ever rise? And then once the submarine reaches the surface, well, we all know that that's not good, because the submarine, once it becomes visible, can get bombed from the enemy. So there's a lot going on there. But so the submarine actually is a character in the book. It's not just a metaphor. It's actually a plot device. It's really, like I said, the designing principle of the whole novel. So it is appropriate that the periscope is on my logo for now until my new novel. Then I'll have to change it. I'll have to get my
Right.
friend to change it. My friend is the one who came up with that.
Oh my gosh, it's so again, it just so caught my eye. It so resonated with me. And yeah, yeah. So are you talking about your new novel yet? Are you giving any hints about what it's about?
Yeah, I can talk about it. I don't know how, or I mean, actually, I'm just today. I'm trying to settle in on what the designing principle of this book will be. I have a lot of writing, tons of pages, but I don't really have a structure, and which is, different novelists write in different ways. And some of my friends, I'm in various groups with other writers, would never even dream of starting a novel without an outline. But I'm the opposite. I just write and write and write. And I take old things that I've written. So I did some world building in a novel that never got published. I took some of that, some of that world, like certain people's jobs, certain characters, some of it's set in Richmond, some of it's set in Washington, D.C. So I took some of these settings and scenarios, and then I've been doing a lot of emotional or psychological writing around it. I'm trying to fit it into place. And so the possible design principles, one of them is the human emotions, fear, shame, the five basic emotions: fear, shame, anger, disgust, surprise, that kind of stuff. Like just using those as either chapters or themes or even characters. I'm not sure. That's one of them. And the other one is battle. So I've been doing a lot of research into Greek, like sort of the Trojan War and the Iliad and the Peloponnesian Wars, like really early wars that are super simple, because war has gotten so much more complicated over time. But just boats and islands, and like, will the people climb the wall? Really basic battle structure, maybe using that as a designing principle. So that's sort of what I'm wrestling with today. So, but it's very much in process, this book. I'm really into it, but it's very much forming, even though I have like 350 pages written. So
Wow.
still
Well,
still forming.
you have me like, I'm so inspired. I wanted to start writing. I'm not kidding. Like, on my to-do list today, it was to write some blog articles, or I have to write some stuff. And but now I'm thinking, ooh, I so need to go dive back into the books. Like, it's time. It's so, when my mom passed, right before she died on my birthday in March of 23, this past year. I can't believe we're coming up on a year next month. But she said to me, Teri, it's time. it's time to put the book out there, because I kept dragging my feet because I was like, oh, I don't want to hurt my mom, because it's our ugly truths, because a lot of it was, that journey with her and her addictions through the years. So yeah, it is
And she
interesting.
actually told you that to go ahead and publish it?
Yeah, yeah. So she put her
Well, you
stamp.
have permission. That's really getting permission.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, she kept telling me, it's okay, you can put it out, you can put it out. But right before she passed, she looked at me and said, it's time. And I just remember, Mom,
Yeah,
thanks,
I'm
Mom.
really sorry.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, we traveled quite a forgiveness journey, which was wonderful. So yeah. Anyway. So yeah, so artist and performer as well as writer. So um do you stay with this theme in your sharing your truths as part of your performance and artist work?
Which theme?
Sharing your truths and in your journey of your childhood trauma and working your way into healing. And I know you said you're in 12 steps, and so like through your sobriety journey and so forth.
Yes and no. 12 step, it's kind of tricky with 12-step recovery because there's a tradition in the 12-step program that you don't do that. It's I can't remember which tradition, but it's basically you stay anonymous at the level of radio, press, TV, and film. And it is called like Alcoholics Anonymous or whatever 12-step program you're in. There's always that anonymous tagged on the end of it. And there is some discussion about, what does that even mean, anonymous? Did you ever read Infinite Jest by David Foster Wallace?
No.
Well, it's a very seminal literary novel from the 90s that was, just immediately accepted into the literary canon, and huge novel, like at least 1,000 pages. But he actually ended up committing suicide. But he was sober in AA, and instead of admitting it, he made his character's getting sober in AA and goes to rehab and all that. But then when he was interviewed, he would say, I just did research. I would go to meetings and take notes. And that's just so dishonest. And if you're really not allowed to do that anyway, I mean, if that's what he was doing, that is extremely betraying of the people in the meeting, so he just like made up all these stories. And it seems kind of silly retrospectively. Like, who cares if he admitted he was in AA? There's good reasons for it, but and also with social media, it's just confusing to me. So, like, for example, I wrote a novel that was a lot of the principles and the attitudes and the healing journey was the AA experience, but I disguised it as sort of a radical Christian group so nobody would know it was AA. And then when I tried to get the novel published, I couldn't get it published because it was so Christian. And I'm like, wait, that's not real. Like, I just made that up, and they were like, you should get a Christian publisher, and we don't publish Christian fiction. And I just wanted to say, no, it's not. I didn't want to break my anonymity. So that novel never got published. And so it's kind of tricky. I don't really, with the 12-step stuff, it's supposed to be anonymous and secret. And yet it can be so helpful to people if you talk about it. And so even on a podcast, I don't really know. Like, so no, I don't really, I always obscure the 12-step stuff when I'm in fiction.
Yes.
Although my
Well,
character in the daughtership is sober and she does go to meetings. I don't, yeah, it's just tricky. I don't really,
it
I
is
guess
tricky.
yeah.
I completely understand. I did uh children of alcohol adult children of
ACA.
alcoholics. Yeah,
Yeah.
adult children of alcoholics meetings. So I understand, they do talk about the anonymity part of it, and not saying anything outside of group, but it becomes a part of you. It's a part of your healing journey. And so
Oh my
it's like,
God, I've been doing it for 30 years. I mean, I've been going to meetings every week for 30 years. There's no way I can really write about my journey without writing about being in 12-step groups. So it is in the daughtership. I pretty much I mean, I guess what I should say is I pretty much threw the tradition out the window or reinterpreted it, my way. And so with the emotional future, which is the name of my new novel, it's not really a big part of it. It's a little more it's yeah, I don't know yet, but it's even though the step work that I've done, step work is just inventory, and I did a lot of really elaborate step work during COVID with like big charts and different colored magic markers, really almost dismembering my relationship patterns, the way I love, the way I make friends, I got divorced, right before COVID. So I was really looking hard at like why my marriage failed and or why it transformed or whatever you want to call it. It ended. and and I have all this like incredible stuff. It took a lot of time, and I'm trying to weave that into my new novel, but it wouldn't be, nobody will know that that's what it was. It will be transformed by the time the reader gets it. It won't be obvious that it was like, oh, this was somebody's fourth step, but it did start that way. I mean, it's a grid. It's just a way of looking at things and like seeing your own patterns, your own part in things.
Right.
So yeah, if you took anything out of 12 step and push it far enough, it becomes unrecognizable.
Right. No, and I love that philosophy because you are taking your truth, which 12 step is
Mhm.
part of,
It's
obviously.
a tool.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean,
Yeah.
just like EMDR or parts work, EFT tapping,
Hmm.
whatever
I
you
mean, it's
use.
basically 12-step recovery is basically cognitive behavioral therapy mixed with straight out spiritual experience, straight out, just visionary, mystical, one-on-one, you and God. Like that's whatever it's all pushing toward, whether people get there or not. Any God you want, but that's just being human, like seeking that God influence going either inside you or above you. That's just human. So that doesn't need to be anonymous. Like so.
Right. Right. Absolutely. And the more we talk about it, the more I think people don't feel so all alone, but it would help direct people to that if they can resonate with it and say, "Oh my gosh, this is the missing piece. This is what I need in my life."
Well, the problem with it, I think the reason they have that tradition is just because if someone like Russell Brand, who he's kind of gone all the way where do you know who Russell Brand is?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So he like rewrote a book. He rewrote the 12 steps and called it like Russell Brand's book, and then he's kind of got a cult following in England. He has his own meetings. He has his own 12-step podcast. And so I think the reason that they have that is so that won't happen. So that one personality can't, sort of say, well, this is AA. And since I'm Russell Brand and everybody knows who I am, I get to be the last voice on what AA is. Mostly because like if he starts drinking again or if he's not sober, then people will just say, oh, it doesn't work. So I
Gotcha.
think that was why they did it originally, but that was in like the 1940s or 1930s, and things have changed so much with social media and everybody has their own personal, we have this podcast. It's not that, it's just whatever the idea of what public domain is has changed so much. And I think it's probably not really applicable anymore.
Yeah. Well, I agree with social media. Just it's shifted everything. So yeah.
Yes. I mean, who could have predicted in 1940?
Right. Right. Exactly. Well, we could sit here and talk for, I'm sure, a long, long time, but I certainly wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe touch upon anything or leave folks with a final thought before we close out.
Oh my goodness, one final thought. I mean, I guess I would just say, the reason I'm doing the podcast, honestly, is just to encourage people to buy the book and read the book. It has been hard to, there's so many books that come out, and it's just a matter of looking at it. So I guess I would just suggest, if you're at all interested, just go to my website, bootrundle.com, or you can look on my Instagram, or you can just Google Boo Trundle the Daughtership. I'm on TikTok. I've really tried in the last 6 months. The book came out in June, to just continue to just give people some idea of what the book's about, and to invite. It's like an invitation, like, please read the book. It's not so much a marketing pitch as an invitation. I do think it's a healing book, and I think the book can be of service, sort of in the greater effort or the greater conversation about being a human, how hard it is to be human, and how to overcome suffering and do it creatively, do it bravely, and do it in a way that is collaborative with all the other suffering people. Like, we're all suffering. We're all suffering, but we're also all celebrating. And I kind of feel that art is the perfect convergence of celebration and suffering, art to me. And I do think this book it leans more towards being a work of art kind of a novel. And just because it's not to brag, but just because it is different and it is unique. So that would be, I guess my last word is, yeah, buy my book, read my book, but also just keep going.
Yeah. Well, and I told you, I said people are looking for a hand to hold, and it's so nice to be able to, that your hand is there for them to hold along their journey as they escape really into this story.
Well,
Or
I also feel blessed to have had the time and the opportunity to write it. And also I feel wildly blessed to have had a publisher pick it up and put it out there. So, it's just I'm trying to share the blessing, and also just in the warrior spirit to continue to seek the truth, be the truth, share the truth.
yes, amen. All right. So how do folks get a hold of you and connect with you again?
You can email me through my website. It's trundle.com. I'm also on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on all the platforms. I am equally obscure on all social media platforms, but I'm there. I'm waving my little flag, like looking for
Right.
attention.
No, I
So
get it. I'm there with you. All right.
thank
Well,
you so
it's
much for having me
Oh,
on.
yes, absolutely. It's just been a joy. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for being here and yeah, sharing your story with us. So, all right. Well, everyone, thanks for joining us today on the Healing Place podcast. And remember, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Thanks. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. Teri Wellbrock here. Just wanted to thank you again for being a part of this healing space and my hashtag Hope for Healing journey. Thank you for sharing, liking, inviting others to join, listening in. You've really helped this show blossom. It has now been downloaded in 136 countries and is in the top 2% globally out of 3.2 million shows, which is just amazing. And it's all because of you and your tuning in and inviting others and sharing and liking and loving. And your reviews on Apple really help too. My goal is to hit 100 5-star reviews by the end of the year. And I am closing in on that. So if you are listening in on Apple or Apple Podcasts, please go and rate the show and leave a review if you absolutely love it. And I would be most appreciative. Also, if you would like to receive my monthly Hope for Healing newsletter, please be sure to go to teriwellbrock.com. It's Teri, just one R, WELLBROCK.com. And I have a gift to send you for signing up for that monthly Hope for Healing newsletter. Plus, there are many other resources listed on that page, including a resource library. All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.